of CM Punk and Daniel Bryan, and he was really getting over in the programs with CM Punk and Daniel Bryan, and he was at least challenging for the championship. By 2013, he won a championship. He was the world champion for not very long, but at least he was champion for a meaningful amount of time, and it was a reign that people will remember. And I think that what we want from Dolph Ziggler now is a reign that people are going to remember with him being WWE World Heavyweight Champion. I mean, you put him in a program with Seth Rollins, and you're going to get people talking, and you're definitely going to turn heads, because the styles of Dolph Ziggler and Seth Rollins resemble each other so phenomenally well that it can easily get over. In my opinion, it's the replacement for a CM Punk going up against a replacement for Shawn Michaels or Mr. Perfect. That argument is something I will fight for until my dying day, because I really believe there's a resemblance in there somewhere with Shawn Michaels and Curt Hennig that resembles and goes back to Dolph Ziggler. And I think that was really a huge influence on Dolph Ziggler's repackaging from being a Spirit Squad member in 2006. When he reappeared in WWE by 2007, 2008, I mean, he was a great wrestler, and the resemblance he had of retro wrestlers was phenomenal. I said, this guy is the total package. He's going to go the distance, and here is what WWE has been looking for to replace and kind of catapult people like Dolph Ziggler into the future and replace the legacies of people like Mr. Perfect and Shawn Michaels. What would ever happen? It got me to thinking, if Curt Hennig ever faced Dolph Ziggler or Dolph Ziggler ever faced Shawn Michaels, what would ever happen in a one-on-one match? We saw him work with Shawn Michaels as part of the Spirit Squad, but let's see him work with people like Curt Hennig and Shawn Michaels, people he resembles, of the new talent initiative. It would be awesome seeing something done with Dolph Ziggler. And I really hate doubting Dolph Ziggler. Don't take anything that I've said about Ziggler out of context with this video blog. I really hate doubting in Dolph Ziggler's ability, because I really thought he was going to go the distance. As I said, he was on the top of my 5 favorite wrestlers list, and he could still be on the top of that list. But the thing is, they're not doing anything creatively with Dolph Ziggler. I mean, even if they just gave him the Intercontinental Championship and focused on him being the greatest Intercontinental Champion of the new talent initiative, kind of similar to how they focused on AJ being the greatest Divas Champion since the inception of the title back in 2007, 2008, holding it for over 295 days. We didn't see a meaningful reign as Dolph Ziggler as World Champion. We didn't see a meaningful reign as him being Intercontinental Champion. It seems like when Ziggler gets a strap, it's almost immediately the strap is taken off him and put on a Wade Barrett or a Rusev, and I really hate how WWE keep going back to the same 3 or 4 wrestlers, and as a result, different wrestlers had to sit on the bench, and they had to sit on the bench because of this for far too long. The Survivor Series elimination match should have catapulted Dolph Ziggler to either winning the Royal Rumble or somehow finding a way, squandering his way into the main event of WrestleMania 31. Nothing was ever done, and I think far more creative things can be done for him than putting him in matches with Luke Harper, where Luke Harper knocks off people like Dolph Ziggler. I'm sick of Dolph Ziggler dropping the belts to people like Wade Barrett and Luke Harper, because Dolph Ziggler ultimately, at the end of the day, is a far more technically sounded and far more skilled wrestler than what Luke Harper or Wade Barrett ever are. And I'm not knocking Luke Harper and Wade Barrett. I just think that WWE creative members love to play favorites, and they are always playing favorites with the Rybacks, with the Luke Harpers, with the Wade Barretts, with the Daniel Bryans. And because they love to keep going back to favorites and playing with those 4 or 5 favorites all the time, juggling between 4 or 5 different parties, we're seeing more than enough wrestlers suffer, and Dolph Ziggler is up the top of the sufferation list in WWE. It's either the suffocation or suffering list that Ziggler is on the top of, and I don't think that this is acceptable because of just how phenomenal of a talent Ziggler actually is. And how can you go on with your life without noticing the potential that goes with Dolph Ziggler? And the best you have for him is to put him in a program with Rusev, which we know before anything ever gets started with this program is going to go nowhere, especially for the career of Dolph Ziggler. Out of the 4 individuals, males and females, in this program, the only one suffering here is Dolph Ziggler, and that's why I really feel for him and his fans. And if you're a Dolph Ziggler fan, my heart does go out to you, because you're hanging on to Dolph Ziggler and your believement in Dolph Ziggler for dear life. You believe that one day he's going to amount to something far greater than what he is. And I have nothing against you for what you believe in, for being a Dolph Ziggler fan, either or, believing in Dolph Ziggler amounting to something far greater. It's just, I feel, from my point of view and speaking from my perspective, we're going to be waiting a long time before Dolph Ziggler ever amounts to anything. And you may be saying to yourself, what are you talking about? Ziggler's already amounted to something far greater. He's a former world champion. He's main evented against the likes of John Cena and CM Punk. What more can you ask for? There are far more greater things for Ziggler to do. I mean, yes, he won the Money in the Bank briefcase in the SmackDown Money in the Bank ladder match, which is now combined between Raw and SmackDown, and cashed in and won the World Championship. But I mean, what has he done since doing that? That was the career-defining moment for Dolph Ziggler. And I don't see any more career-defining moments for Dolph Ziggler. That's why I'm doubting in Dolph Ziggler. And why don't I see any more career-defining moments for Dolph Ziggler? Because I go back to that promo he did with Kevin Owens on Monday Night Raw when he accepted Kevin Owens' open challenge for what was supposed to have been for the NXT Championship. He said nobody had scratched and clawed like Ziggler had scratched and clawed for years, ever since he was a member of the Spirit Squad, and he was never given the benefit of the doubt or never given enough chances, and he never spoke truer words in his life up until that point. He was very to the point, he was very honest and openly minded to wrestling fans. Kevin Owens took exception to what Dolph Ziggler had to say, and Kevin Owens came out on top again. Another example of how Ziggler has put over more talents than putting over himself in matches, being the show-off. There's just something about Ziggler that really stands out to me more than any new talented wrestler, and I think you cannot go on with your life without rewarding or recognizing the potential that goes with Ziggler. And how many times has he dropped straps or dropped to just wrestlers wanting to get over in this business? More times than enough. And I'm tired of seeing it for Dolph Ziggler, because I really believe that he can really go the distance and amount to something far greater. And I know I'm not alone. I think I speak for millions of wrestling fans and fans of Dolph Ziggler likewise when I say I know I'm not alone. I know that there are more people, or just as many people out there, that believe in Dolph Ziggler just as much as what I do, and want to see him amount to something far greater than what he is right now in WWE. And am I wrong with what I've said about Dolph Ziggler? No, I don't think I'm wrong. I think that we just need to recognize Dolph Ziggler's potential more than what we have over the better part of the last, I'd say, half of a decade, which will bring you up to about 5 years at this point in time. I think that we should have been recognizing this potential far long before now, and I think that it may be a little bit too late for WWE to try to rekindle something and get something going for Dolph Ziggler. A couple of years ago, it was supposed to be about creating stars of tomorrow. And the problem with WWE is, just when you think someone's going to get a bit of momentum on their shoulders and ride a proverbial wave of momentum, somebody new comes into WWE with even more promise. I remember when someone was getting a push a number of years ago, back in 2010, 2011, out of nowhere, here comes this Mexican phenomenon, Alberto Del Rio. And I mean, how long was Alberto Del Rio in the WWE before Rey Mysterio was putting him over, and he was winning world championships and Royal Rumble matches? He was there no time, and he was getting over. I think back then, they were having a lot of influence on Sheamus, the more that I think about it. And Sheamus's push was actually killed, which has now been rekindled in 2015, which is absolutely pointless and pathetic, because this should have been happening for Sheamus years ago. They were pushing Sheamus with so much momentum. He seemed to be heading in a probable direction. Here comes Alberto Del Rio and steals that thunder. And correct me if I'm wrong, but the same thing is happening in 2015. That's been happening for years. It's an issue going on without correction, and I don't think it's going to be corrected anytime soon. And as a result, people like Dolph Ziggler are on the back burner all the time. They're sitting on the proverbial bench waiting for an opportunity that, I hate to break it to you, is never going to come. And that's the inspiration behind one of my latest columns, Doubting Dolph Ziggler for In This Corner with Jonathan Clarke, why I've been shooting on him for Cheap Shots with Jonathan Clarke from HEW Entertainment, my Google video blog with thousands of page views, up to over 10,000, why I've been posting so many videos on wrestlers like Dolph Ziggler, because I truly believe that if we were listened to more from the point of view of wrestling fans and they were in creative control, people like Dolph Ziggler would be on top more than they've ever been in their careers because of creative, and wrestling would be a far better place. Because if I've said it once, I've said it a million times over, and I can get away with saying it again. Wrestling fans are some of the smartest people in this business, who go without recognition and go without acknowledgement or credit far too many times, who should be given credit for having such an extensive amount of knowledge about politics and what goes on behind closed doors and behind the scenes in professional wrestling. If we listen to wrestling fans more in this business, the wrestling business would be a far better place, a more entertaining thing to watch, and just a better product all around. And I think that wrestling fans should be given more credit than what they're given credit for, because they are really smart. They understand psychology, and they know what to buy into and not what to accept nor buy into, which is great. It's a great way of looking at the business, and I think it can't go without recognition. So why do we keep going back to the same 4 or 5 people all the time? Take, for instance, Seth Rollins. Why do we keep going back to him? Because he's being paid to get on our nerves, cut a promo about how he's the alleged future of the business, and he can get away with it. And that's why WWE keep going back to people like him, because they know people like Seth Rollins understand the psychology of getting under our skin. And as long as he's there to get under our skin and achieves his purpose, WWE are always going to have him on top as champion, and people like Dolph Ziggler are only going to continue to suffer. And I really hate that, because Dolph Ziggler has more fans out there than Seth Rollins ever has. Now, Seth Rollins has an exceptional amount of fans who back him all the time, but not as many as what Dolph Ziggler has had. Either when Ziggler was champion, Intercontinental champion, or he was a part of the Spirit Squad, fans recognized the potential of Ziggler ever before Creative did, or anybody in the upper levels of WWE ever did. But for some reason, they keep going back to the same 4 or 5 people all the time: the Daniel Bryans, the Randy Ortons, and the Seth Rollins. They're playing favorites way too much, and as a result, more than enough wrestlers on the creative side of things are suffering. The far more creative wrestlers who should be being pushed are the ones always put on the back burner and placed on the bench. And I think this goes on way too much. And I want your opinion and your perspective on this. So if you have a file, you can leave it for me in the comments of this video on my channel at Jonathan Clarke 22. You can tweet me your opinion on Twitter at Jonathan Clarke 1, and you can give me something on my Facebook page to look forward to at HEW Entertainment. And by the way, guys, keep sharing our content. Let this issue be known throughout social media and different blog websites on the internet. I really appreciate how people share our content and get our videos out there, because not enough promotion is never enough, and I think that everybody contributing to this show and getting our content out there in the way they have over the last number of years is really appreciative and can't go without reconciliation. And I really thank you guys for throwing our videos out there. I'd love to know what other people's opinion is on issues like people like Summer Rae, who I talked about last week here on the program, and now this week shedding the lineup spotlight on Dolph Ziggler, because I really think he needs 15 minutes of fame, and he needs a longer 15 minutes of fame than he's ever been given in his career. Am I wrong with having said what I've said from my point of view and perspective on Dolph Ziggler and speaking on this issue? No, I don't think I'm wrong at the end of the day. I just think this is an issue that's gone without correction for far too long now, and I think more people should be given the benefit of the doubt. Why should someone of novelty come in and always steal the thunder? Why should Kevin Owens be on top, getting over in matches with John Cena, beating John Cena, a man who's supposed to be a 15-time world champion? Shouldn't that honor be going to people like Dolph Ziggler, who have the experience? Whatever happened to experienced wrestlers facing each other? Why is so much emphasis put on an independent wrestling career now in professional wrestling, and how Kevin Owens has been involved in the wrestling business on the independent level for over 13 years? Why is there so much emphasis on independent wrestling? Now, I'm not saying that independent wrestlers are not talented, because God knows they are.